The Russian glide bombing campaign escalated over 2025 with over 44,000 drops, hitting both Ukrainian military positions and the civilian population. This bombing campaign is a significant threat to Ukraine, but also representative of a wider Russian threat that is relevant to NATO. Russia uses two types of glide bombs, the UMPK and UMPB, each having subvariants. The first type is the UMPK modular kit that can be installed on conventional 250 to 3000 kg bombs. The UMPK kit had problems with accuracy as impact points suggest a high circular error probable, or CEP. For example, a CEP of 25 meters means that only 50% of bombs land within 25 meters of the designated point of impact. Russian bombs were often in excess of 25 meters, but have progressively improved, striking much closer over time. The second type is the UMPB. This is a purpose-built glide bomb. Reports indicate that the UMPB has improved accuracy over UMPK and is less susceptible to electronic warfare jamming. However, it has a smaller explosive yield. Recent modifications also add a rocket engine, further extending the range. Both of these types are cheap. Now, the primary aircraft dropping glide bombs in the current conflict is the Russian Sukhoi Su-34 fallback. While over Russian-held territory, the Sukhoi accelerates on the way to the release point at high altitude. Both release altitude and release speed significantly influence the range of the glide bomb, and they are typically dropped at 35 to 50 kilometers from the front line. Based on available figures, Russian glide bomb production and employment has significantly increased since 2023. It is not clear how many fallbacks fly these sorties, but we can speculate on the number. If we take the currently reported figure by Ukraine of 130 glide bombs a day across 2025, then divide that number by 4 based on the assumption of a full fallback loadout, then we arrive at a figure of 32 sorties a day. Mathematically, this is equivalent to about 2 squadrons worth of aircraft, which would be a significant investment. Not accounting for operational availability, this is about 25% of the Russian fallback fleet, and not all of them have been deployed against Ukraine. Thus, assuming a sustainable rate of 2 sorties a day per airframe, with some crew changes, about 1 fighter squadron could theoretically cover the sortie rate. But that is speculation. Potentially the VKS is using less aircraft at a more intensive rate or is spreading glide bomb usage across aircraft. Drop rates could also fluctuate over surge and drought periods. Given that the VKS has not deployed all fallbacks against Ukraine, there is a question to what degree daily glide bombing could scale over sustained periods of time without increasing the number of employed aircraft or using other aircraft types. It can also be assumed that based on the number of sorties that are flown, that the VKS has developed their tactics, techniques and procedures on this, while improving the targeting cycle to be faster and more responsive to their own ISR. The effect of glide bombs is that they shape battlefield geometry. Typical targets include Ukrainian frontline positions to punch holes for infiltration squads. Command posts, drone operators, stockpiles and assembly areas are equally held at risk, needing to displace, disperse and stay ahead or below Russian targeting cycles to avoid being targeted. Unmasking with artillery, air defense or electronic emissions risks positions being identified and subsequently fixed, tracked and engaged. Alongside Russian drone and artillery strikes, this causes a dilemma. Ukraine must invest and hold static defensive positions to prevent Russian forces from achieving a penetration. Yet it also must retain mobility and concealment on the front line and in depth to avoid being targeted. Glide bombs have given the VKS reach without the requirement to achieve air superiority or penetrating Ukrainian airspace. It is a low-cost standoff strike capability that is difficult to counter in the current operational context. Now, well-established and hardened defensive positions offer a measure of protection, as does tactical mobility. However, both are reactive to the Russian threat, which is very low cost. On occasion, glide bombs can be targeted with ground-based air defense. Yet beyond the practical challenges of rapidly tracking, engaging and hitting these small targets, this is not a net cost-effective solution with current munitions. An electronic warfare jamming of specific frequencies used to correct navigation towards set coordinates can be effective in degrading accuracy, and Ukraine had a lot of success in this. Yet Russian counter-electronic warfare is constantly evolving as well. So, to state the obvious, to defeat glide bombs it is best to deter or destroy the aircraft that carry them. Ukraine has been able to do so, targeting aircraft on the ground and in the air. However, Russian reconstitution efforts have now eclipsed fallback losses. Russian aircraft can still fly at altitudes that permit them to drop glide bombs deep into Ukrainian territory. And Russian fighters can operate at this altitude due to two main reasons. First, Ukrainian air defense has limited operational options to engage Russian fighters. Pushing long-range Patriot launchers closer to the front line risks their destruction to Russian artillery, drones, or even glide bombs. Ukraine also needs Patriot against Russian cruise and ballistic missiles. Second, Russian air defense forces Ukrainian fighters to fly at very low altitudes. This puts Ukrainian fighters at a kinematic disadvantage, as Ukrainian F-16s currently do not have the range and radar or missiles to target the fullbacks on typical sorties. Longer-range air-to-air munitions could provide improvements if made available. However, this would have to be part of a larger effort to shape the air domain in Ukraine's favor in order to have a lasting effect. The VKS's glide bombing efforts and the dynamics that shape them are significant. More long-range air munitions and radar are required to permit Ukrainian fighters to hold Russian fighters at risk at range. It is unclear when these could be supplied, and it is noteworthy that Russia has been consistently extending the range of glide bombs in the meantime, potentially with this looming threat in mind. In parallel, artillery and tactical drones offer options to target Ukrainian positions on the front line, while Russia's Deep Strike campaign with a mix of low and high-cost cruise missile binds Ukrainian air defense. A concerted and sustained effort of strengthening Ukraine's air force, air defense and joint fires for the suppression and destruction of Russian air defense would provide the basis for a more permissible environment for Ukrainian fighters to reach into Russian territory with air-launched munitions. In the meantime, further sanctioning pressure to prevent Russia from receiving the materials and equipment needed to reconstitute its losses is required. And as we zoom out of the present conflict and consider the wider implication, the extended range of reasonably accurate, cheap air-to-ground munitions makes, well, Russian glide bombs a threat not just to Ukraine, but also NATO should a wider European flashpoint occur. Here, the Russian glide bombing campaign is symptomatic of a bigger problem, and that is that the VKS reconstitution efforts allow it to increase in strength. Russian fighter crews have operated in a contested environment and have transitioned to longer-range air-to-air and air-to-ground munitions. Significantly, they have gained combat experience with live weapons employment within a vastly more significant threat environment than in the previous operations such as Syria. Russian long-range air defense has taken losses but continues to be a threat, forcing Ukrainian fighters to fly at very low altitudes. By now, Russian air defense must have gained experience against Western munitions such as the AGM-88 HARM missile. The traditional rivalry between Russian fighter aviation and air defense arms has made way for improved coordination and deconfliction. Given the scale and concentration of glide bombing on certain axes, it is also likely that air-ground integration has improved. Equally, the Russian aircraft industry has managed to reconstitute initial losses and replace older models with new variants. Russia does have significant problems when it comes to producing aircraft, mainly by its reliance on foreign materials, machining tools, and subcomponents. Yet for now, it manages to keep up a steady trickle of new aircraft that outpace the loss rates in combat air fleets. All in all, this indicates that the Russian VKS is now more numerous and experienced than in 2022. In isolation, Russian fighters may not pose a threat to a collective effort by air forces in NATO. Yet air forces in NATO, especially the European ones, would face the VKS as part of a collective Russian threat picture, including significant air defenses, electronic warfare, and improving air munition capabilities. European countries in particular have pivoted against this threat, increasing orders in particular of long-range air-to-air and SEAD and DEAD munitions. Various countries are equally investing in significant deep strike capabilities. These will take a few years to be delivered. Equally, specialist standard systems are being considered for use, but they either have to still be integrated or have to technologically mature. The training of pilots has also changed in various nations to include more complex, fast-paced, and sophisticated scenarios to prepare aircrews for the dynamics of a high-intensity conflict. However, modern electronic attack capabilities to degrade Russian air defense radar are not yet integrated into European air forces at scale, despite existing equipment and know-how. Thus, European air forces have the ingredients to achieve control of the air in a wider European flashpoint, but must move rapidly to build up necessary stocks, integrate available systems, and develop the joint fires required. Demonstrating an ability to wage a fast-paced, sustained SEAD-DEAD campaign is a significant capability that, as one of its results, would prevent a sustained Russian glide bombing campaign against the territory of European NATO members. More significant on the strategic level, however, is that as European air forces strengthen, they also have a deterrent effect towards further Russian aggression. And this must be done in parallel to continued support to Ukraine, which is a difficult but possible and necessary task. Hi, it's Chris from Military Aviation History, and I will be speaking at the 2026 Panzerkonferenz in Vienna this year. It'll happen in October, and if you want to know how to take part, how to get a ticket, do check out the description below. As always, have a great day and see you in the sky.